Warm up here. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's so nice to be back. It's so nice to see you guys. All the good things that are going on. Before I begin my talk, just a couple things that I want to say. First of all, is I'm just so thrilled for you that my good buddy Reverend John De Palma is spending time with you. He is so grounded. He is so unflappable. He and I have been buddies for a long while, I guess. Anyway, I'm just so happy that you guys have him here. The other thing that I want to say is, I think one of the reasons why I love coming up here is I get these cool leads on things. So let me say something before I even say there is you can put a microphone in my hand and on Sunday service and a talk, and I'll try to educate you and inspire you and hopefully entertain you. And at the end of service, I'm like Rain Man. I say yes to everything and I agree with everything, and then I leave. I was like, what was I just talking about? But somebody had the good sense to recommend a book to me. It was called The Overstory. And I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember who recommended the book, but she handed me a piece of paper and said, read this book. Brilliant book. The book is literally rewired my brain. And let me explain what I mean by that. There's something about when we're engaged in something, we pay attention to that thing. And the more we pay attention to that thing, this is actually real brain science, something called the Reticular Activating System, the RAS, begins to engage our mind and filter things out. So this is the thing that we pay attention to. And the book was about trees. And we have this beautiful tree. It's a Modesto ash in our front yard. And just the fact of being aware allowed a sense of presence. Because, in mental science, we talk a lot about consciousness. It's a great word. We throw it out all the time. And often we don't know what it means. But my working definition for consciousness is attentiveness, the thing that we pay attention to. And what motivates us to pay attention is our desire, right? Our yearning for something. And what mystics have taught from Augustine to Eliphas Levi to Kierkegaard is this: we are what we are becoming. If you want to know who you are becoming the thing that you attend to. And the thing that you attend to is birth from our desires. So our desires are the thing that lead us into our becoming. In other words, we are what we desire. Breathe that in. Breathe that in. So there's a lot of things we don't have choice over, but we didn't have a say, at least consciously, or at least in this life, about our gender, our orientation, our the family that we're born into. There's a lot of things that we just inherited, but what we do have choice over is the things that we attend to. What we do have choice over is our desires. And so this is where real freedom comes in. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because when Marjorie sent me the talk title, the theme of the month, and where we are, Marjorie and I have this thing that kind of goes back and forth on that because my belief is this, and it goes back to the old Terry Cole Whitaker days, which is never let a talk title stand in the way of what you want to say. But I play a little game with myself, which is how do I weave that in? And so the talk title is this. It's Surrender is Action. And I love this. Surrender is action. And surrender is not defeat. There's a wonderful image of in the Hebrew legends and mythology about surrender. And surrender, a friend of mine in recovery says, well, surrender is joining the winning side. And it's like, well, I don't quite agree with that. I think that's more opportunism than surrender. Surrender is about taking refuge. In fact, one of the great Hebrew names of the divine is El Shaddai. And El Shaddai is the mountain, the holy mountain. In fact, there's this wonderful story in the Hebrew Bible. It's in chapter 20, I believe, in the book of Exodus. It says this. It says, after the people arrived where the divine was supposed to be on Mount Sinai, and there was all these miraculous things, thunder and flames, and all this other kind of stuff. They were like freaked out. And so what it says, and it's the 22nd verse of the 20th chapter of the book of Exodus. It says that the people stood at a distance. And the people stood at a distance while Moses entered the thick darkness where God was present. I love that image. Because first of all, isn't that like all of us? That something scares us, something thinks us, you take care of it, you do it. We are so willing to outsource the authority of our own life. You do that, you pray, you do whatever. But in this thick darkness, what's interesting in the Hebrew mythology is there's so much about light and darkness. In fact, the whole creation myth begins in darkness, begins in chaos. In the beginning created God, the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And this is where the juice is. This is where it begins. And isn't it interesting, as we are moving toward the darkest time of year, that all of our festivals are about light? It's I love that we have a menorah up here today. I live in a blended household of several things. My partner is she's from the not just a Jew, she is a New York Jew, and that's very specific. Kind of like I come from an Italian Catholic. I mean, these are like caricatures. They're like archetypes, right? So we have, we got candles all over the place right now. And I thought she was a yogi in her life too. So we've got, Ganesh and Nataraj and Mary and you name it. There's a statue. Our house is kind of like a Hare Krishna temple. But we also have the menorah burning this week. And we also have the Advent candles burning this week, because not only did Hanukkah begin last Sunday night, but last Sunday was also the first Sunday of Advent. So I want to be real clear about something, which is this, is that, in fact, there was a couple articles last week in the New York Times about this, is that Hanukkah is not Jewish Christmas. You know that. They are completely different stories. There's very little in common other than candles. One is about, as was spoken earlier, it's a remembrance of something. It's a recalling of something, where Advent is about waiting for something. And there's, the word Advent comes from the Latin adventus, which means to arrive. But I like the Greek. The Greek is parousia, which means presence. What we're waiting for is already present. One of my favorite lines in the Gospel of St. Thomas is when the disciples come to Jesus and they say, "When will the kingdom come?" In the Gospel of Thomas it says that Jesus answers, "The kingdom of the heavens will not come by waiting. The kingdom of the heavens is," present tense, "is spread upon the earth, but people do not see it." And why don't they see it? Because we're looking somewhere else. Right? Because our attention, our awareness is someplace other than what is obvious. And what I loved about this book, The Overstory, is it was about attending to a living planet. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin says that we are the heart and mind of a living planet. If we think in terms of Mother Earth, Gaia, as a living organism, we are the heart and mind. And just like any organism, if the heart and the mind are sound, the body is sound. But if the heart and mind are distracted or diseased, then the body is diseased. And isn't that just what we're seeing right now? And so here we are in the second Sunday of Advent. Here we are concluding this year's Hanukkah. Here we are right after this great eclipse that happened on Friday. You know, all this energy. And for myself, what I like to look at when I look at a story, a myth, a legend, a scripture, a song, is to look at it maybe in four ways. You know, first, when we look at the story of Hanukkah, or we look at the story of, you know, baby Jesus, or whatever story we want to that we're celebrating, first of all, there's the literal meaning of the story, right? What's the literal meaning of the story is that there was a religious uprising in Jerusalem, you know, 100 and whatever BCE, and there was a dedication of the temple, and all these things happened. That's the literal story. But then there's the context of the story. And the context is that this story takes place in a larger story, because it's really about freedom of expression. It's really about self-determination. And so the second part of looking at a story then is in the context. But then the third part of it is the allegory, right? And the allegory means it's like something. You know, Hanukkah to me is like me finally standing up to what I believe in. Hanukkah is when we put the opportunity to be free above all other things. But then there's the metaphysical interpretation of any story, which it's almost like a dream interpretation. It's kind of like, you know, I am this light that is yearning, and that the source of this light is eternal, and that I don't have to be distracted by the appearance of things, as Emma Curtis Hopkins says, but rather I can have the risk, the faith of it. Kierkegaard says that faith is risk with a direction. Breathing. So let's let that one percolate in. Our faith, our trust. What we trust is a risk with a direction, with an intention. But life is risky business. These days are risky business, right? There's nothing predetermined of what's going to happen. You know, my teacher used to say, better a trickster than a martyr be. And why I love that this time of year is that against all odds are the odds the trickster likes. Krishna's a trickster. Frankly, Jesus is a much better trickster than a martyr. Yeah, he died on the cross, but what did he do 3 days later? Surprise! Better a trickster than a martyr be. And that can be us too, because we kind of get bogged down by these sort of things. There's this wonderful quote from Anita Diamant, who says this: "This is the season when people of all faiths and cultures are pushing back against the planetary darkness. We string bulbs, ignite bonfires, and light candles, and we sing. We sing. We dance. We gather. We engage. Because why are we doing this? Because we are pushing back against the darkness. Now, I just said a few moments ago, darkness, is where creation happens and all that other kind of stuff. But, if you lived 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, some places in this country, maybe 50 years ago, without electricity, when it got dark, it got really dark. Really dark. And when you live in the rhythm of that without electric lights, there's something in the psyche that begins to happen, and you associate the darkness with different kinds of things. There's a sleepiness to it. There's a slowingness to it. There's a you can't see, so there's an ignorance to it. There's a things stop. There's a death to it. Rudolf Steiner says something really interesting, though, is he says that, in the wintertime, when the earth appears covered in a mantle of snow, the earth is most alive. So when I think of my tree in my front yard, and as I'm watching all these leaves, it's so cool. The other day I was sitting and I was reading and I was looking out my window, and all of a sudden it was like a snowstorm of gold just covered the yard. And I loved it. Part of why I love it is I hire a landscaper so I don't have to rake it. I can just enjoy it and somebody else is going to take care of it. Kind of like those people, right? Outsourcing it. But when it appears, even in our own lives, dark, that's where the juice is. You've all had those situations, right? You've all had the situations where something happened out of the blue, and it was frightening, it was devastating, it was whatever the case was. But then when we look back years later, we look and say, that's when I finally decided to take my power back. That's when, fill in the blank. That really, even in that apparent darkest time, was where the juice was. Where really, if we allowed ourselves, we were most alive. So that's seasonally what we're celebrating. And really what we're celebrating in this waiting, this taking refuge, El Shaddai. There's a very curious thing about El Shaddai. El Shaddai it means mountain of refuge, but it also means how do I gracefully say this? So, there's a mountain range called the Grand Tetons, right? And their name, you know what the Grand Tetons means, right? It means big breasts. It does. In French, it means big breasts, Grand Tetons. So El Shaddai means not only mountain of refuge, but it also means the flowing of lactating milk. So when Jesus talks about the El Shaddai God, he's talking about a place that nourishes us like a mother holding her child to the breast. And this is the place that we take refuge. I love that image. Yes? Don't you love that image? So what we're talking about here is living in the world of everyday miracles. Because that's what these stories are all about. The miracle of Hanukkah is what? It's that there's enough. The miracle of Advent is what? Is that divine intelligence, that which was there at the very beginning of all things, comes into being in all creation. The Christmas story is not about baby Jesus. Baby Jesus taught us that we are noble sons and daughters of the Most High. That's the most important thing in that. That you and I, as eyes and ears, are living presences of divine. That nervous system that we love in our body is a carryover of the Big Bang that happened 14 billion plus change years ago. The body that we are in is a result of stars exploding over, eons of time and carbon being created. That our physical beingness is in relation to that which was there at the very beginning of all things. And what the mystical traditions teach us is this, is that that image that is there, as it says in Psalm 32, I believe, that which was there at the very beginning of all things was the divine wisdom, or that we would later call the Logos, that or some to say the Christ. But that image of divine form that was there at the very beginning is living itself as you and I. That's a blooming miracle to me. That's an amazing thing to me. Albert Einstein says this: there are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle. Everything is a miracle. So what do I mean by miracle? You know, two definitions that I play with. One is from Mitch Horowitz, who says, a miracle is a favorable deviation from all reasonable expectancy. So it's kind of like, I didn't know how it was going to happen, but it happened. That's it. You know, it's not so much, you know, the parting of the Red Seas or, you know, or raising from the dead or those kinds of things. But it's like when you didn't think you had enough in your wallet, and then there was. Or you didn't think you had enough gas to get home, and you did. Those kinds of things. Carolyn Mace, when she was in college, studied, and one of the people that she studied was a woman by the name of Sister Kevin. And I love that term. And she says that a miracle is heaven bending the laws of the universe for you. A miracle is when heaven bends the laws of the universe for us. And we can experience that all the time. So let me give you an example. I'm going to offer you 3 miracles that you live with every day. The first is we can see. We can see. We can perceive, we can navigate, we can travel, we can connect. By virtue of the fact that we can see, think of what that means for each and every one of us. All science aside, and science is good, because science can kind of explain the how it is, but the essence of it is. I have a friend in my community. He's an astrophysicist. He's a real astrophysicist, you know. He's again fits right into the mold. He works for JPS, blah, 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 blah. And what he tells me, he says, you know, Guy, he says, science can explain everything that happened from the Big Bang forward. I said, yeah, but Joe, what happened before the Big Bang? We don't go there. We do. We do, right? We do in that form of contemplation of knowingness. We can see. So that's the first miracle that I'm going to offer that we just kind of consider. The second miracle is what? Is that we can hear. We can hear. You can hear me. I can hear you. As a result of that, I can hear the wind in the trees and the birds in the sky. I can hear my partner calling my name. I can hear my dog howling when it's time to take a walk. I can hear music. But that it draws me, it connects me by the virtue of the fact that I can hear, connects me. And then another miracle, we can speak. We can speak. Now, if you're a parent, you may not think that's necessarily miraculous, but it is it not? We can speak. Rabbi Abraham Heschel says this. He says, words create worlds. What we speak, we call into being. Words are they're like living organisms in a sense that when a word is spoken, it can never be retracted. But when a word is spoken, it is spoken to one person, to another person, and then that person takes that word in and it changes them. And then that word goes on to someone else. And that word goes on to someone else. The power, the creativity, the energy, the logos. In the beginning was the word, as John says. These are miracles we see, experience, and hear and speak every day. The kingdom of the heavens is spread upon the earth, but we do not see them. We don't see the everyday miracles. Again, what Anita DeMont says is this. She says, I like the size of the Hanukkah miracle. No parting of the Red Seas, just a story about finding extra oil when you didn't think you had any and you really needed it and all the stores were closed. That's the kind of miracle with which I'm familiar, all along with the miracle of good food and feeding people I love. Right? That's where it is. That's where we want to go. And, that's the name of my tree. I was looking at my note here. So my invitation to each and every one of us is as a spiritual practice, in that surrendering, in that listening, that waiting of Advent, that taking of refuge, powerful things are going on. Miracles are there for us if we just want to engage in it. When it changes us, it changes the world. As we celebrate a season of light, we are creating, as your mission statement says, the opportunity to participate with others in creating a world that works for all life. Dr. Martin Luther King says it probably best. He says, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And so the season that we are reminded then of is that light, love, awareness, these are choices. And so the miracle is to awaken to that yearning within our hearts, that desire that leads us into that becoming, and in that contemplation, that realization that the kingdom of the heavens is spread upon the earth. And it is you, and 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 you. And just like the light, one light is not diminished, but is increased by the lighting of another candle. You know, if there's a candle in the room and somebody else brings in another candle, the candle doesn't go, oh, what's the use? I thought I was the light. All of a sudden, there's more light, and there's more light, and there's more light. And so when we share that, that's the real miracle of the holiday. Marcella Ezra says it this way: when we share something material, we are left with less than what we started. But currencies of spirit, elements such as light, love, and knowledge defy these physical conditions. They increase, and they are shared when they are shared and become eternal. On Hanukkah, when we use one flame to light another, the glow is not halved, the light is multiplied. And so today, our opportunity, by just simply being who we are, the light is multiplied. Thank you very much.